Hello everyone, I'm Barbara Law and I'm here with my husband Terry Law, who has been bringing you a series in the month of May called The Men and Women of Hope. He's been looking at a variety of characters beginning with Noah and including Moses and Jacob, Rahab, Hannah, Samuel, Peter, Jacob. We've just looked at a lot of various...
Joshua.
Oh, and Joshua, right. We've looked at a lot of different characters who faced very, very difficult circumstances in their own lives, some of them by their own making, but many of them not. And how did they respond to those circumstances? Every one of them grabbed on to hope and God, and we saw how that hope transformed their circumstances. Well, today we want to kind of spill over a little bit into the month of June. Recently in America, we are not just now dealing with COVID, but we have had an outbreak of protest and violence across our nation, expressing real outrage over racial injustice. And how do we respond to that very, very, very difficult issue? Like we talked about with the men and women of hope earlier, again, this is a place where we have to grab on to hope. We have been given, as Christians, the ministry of reconciliation. How do we grab hold of that? How do we walk out this circumstance too in our own nation? So I want to turn it over to Terry, who's going to talk to you a little bit about a Syro-Phoenician woman and how she handled the silence of God in the face of a very difficult circumstance.
Thanks, Ann. There's a verse tucked away in the book of Proverbs, chapter 13, verse 12. It's really powerful. It speaks about hope, and it comes at hope from a negative sense in the fact that, here's what the verse says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. Hope deferred, in other words, hope that is not fulfilled, or it seems that God doesn't answer, it makes the heart sick. But when the desire is fulfilled, the verse says, it is a tree of life. In other words, answered hope gives tremendous encouragement to believers. There's another verse tucked away in Matthew I want to mention just at the beginning of this, and it talks about Jesus and the Syro-Phoenician woman. She comes to him, she's crying out, Lord, my daughter's possessed with an evil spirit. I want you to cast it out. You can do it. And the Bible says very simply, he answered her not a word. He did not answer her one word. In other words, she faced the silence of God. And I want to talk about that whole idea today on this program and talk about when God is silent. And let me just say that when hope is deferred, what happens to you and me? When hope is deferred, basically we are disappointed. When things don't work the way we had planned, and we become disappointed when we have a plan that fails, a hope that doesn't materialize, or a goal that is not reached. And it can be as simple as a picnic that is rained out, or a job that's lost, or a child we had hoped would turn out right shows no signs of doing so. We can have hope, lack of hope in life, and it does horrible things. So I'm asking this question on this program today. What happens when we exercise powerful hope and nothing happens? This is reality. It happens to you and it happens to me. It has happened in my life. What happens when we exercise powerful hope and nothing happens? I want to share a testimony, and I don't do this too often on the podcast or the Facebook, but what I want to do today is talk about something that happened to me. I'm going to tell you my story from the past. In 1967, that's going back a long ways now, Oral Roberts was preaching in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. I found out he was there, and I wanted to go and hear him preach. I drove up from the little town of Medicine Hat in southern Alberta, about 350 miles to Edmonton, to the hockey arena, where he was preaching, and I met his organist. Name was Larry Dalton, and I never knew that God was going to link us together years later in actual ministry. But that night, after Oral had finished preaching on the Paul on the road to Damascus, I was reading a brochure from Oral Roberts University, in the hockey arena, and all of a sudden the Lord spoke to me. It was so real. Everything went dead quiet, and the Lord started to speak inside of me. And he said to me very clearly that I was to go to Oral Roberts University. I was to become a student there. And I didn't, wow, I looked at how much it cost. I was making $50 a week as a pastor, working on the farm with cattle, riding horses, branding calves, and that kind of thing. But it was very clear that God wanted me to go to ORU, so I made a decision to do it. It took me about a month to actually come to that actual moment of decision, but I went to Oral Roberts University, and I met Larry again. And Larry and I hooked up in the sense of we really felt that God wanted us to create a music group. And so we gathered some musician students who were friends of ours, and we put a little group together, and we called ourselves Living Sound. And we traveled. Our first concert actually was in Berean Baptist Church, Charismatic Baptist Church in Kansas City. And Honeybee Anderson's father, Pastor Powell, was the director of the church. He invited us to come and do a series of concerts on a weekend. We came. It was certainly nothing major, but we did see 60 people make decisions for Christ that weekend in the church. And I will never forget, on the Sunday morning, the group had just finished the concert, and I was walking actually up the stairs to the pulpit, when a big voice thundered out from the back of the room. And this voice said these words, I have ordained you to go to the nations. I have ordained you to go to the nations. There will come a time when you are homeless, but don't be afraid. I have called you to the nations as kings to conquer. Whoa. That voice was a loud voice. That voice spoke with absolute authority. And as I was walking up to the pulpit with my Bible, I knew in my spirit, way down, I knew that God was calling us to the nations as a group. And when we finished that weekend, we drove home that night, late Sunday night. And Monday morning, Larry and I got together and we met with members of the group, and we said, we really feel the word of the Lord Sunday morning was for us to go to Africa. And everybody decided that they'd like to go. And so that summer, 1968, we did a tour of the United States and up into Canada. We traveled for 5 months. We had to raise airfares in order to go to Africa. I think it was $18,000 was the amount of money that we had to have in going. So we got through the summer, and we began to apply for visas to the South African government. And the South African government refused to extend visas to us. And I mean, we put 5 months of our lives on the line here. We had hope. We had hope in our heart that we were to go to Africa. We felt that God had spoken to us, that God had laid it out very clearly for us. And so we made the plan. But when South Africa didn't grant us visas, it dawned on me that Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe, immediately north of South Africa, they didn't ask for visas for Americans. So we thought, well, we can go in there. And so we boarded an airplane, and we flew to Africa. I remember landing in Salisbury, Rhodesia on the airport, and how excited we were that we were on African soil, and that our hope was being fulfilled. As I walked down off the airplane, someone was calling my name, Terry Law, Terry Law. And I looked around and there was a man in an immigration uniform. I said, I'm Terry Law. He said, are these the names of the people in your group? And he showed me the list. And all of our names were on the page. And I said, yes. I said, where did you get these names? He said, sir, I'm here on the authority of my government to tell you that we are not going to allow you to come into our country. Would you please get back on the airplane? I said, sir, you can't do this. We're not breaking your law. You're changing your law. And he said, sir, don't argue with me. Get back on the airplane. Well, we went back on the plane, and we ended up at the end of that plane's itinerary, which was Beira, Mozambique. Mozambique is a country on the eastern hip of Africa, the African continent. And it was hot there. It was in the middle of the summer for them, which is in December and January in the southern hemisphere. And I tried every day to go and talk to police officials or immigration officials to allow us to stay in Rhodesia. And the more I went, and hey, we did everything we could. I remember we read books on praising the Lord, and we all praised the Lord. And then we had a book on rebuking the devil, and we all rebuked the devil. And then we fasted and prayed. We did everything we could to have an answer from God, because our hope had been totally frustrated and destroyed. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. My heart was sick. There's no other way to describe it than that. And finally, after 3 weeks, the government came to me and said, we are deporting you from Africa back to the United States. I couldn't believe their words. And we were forced on an airplane to fly out of Beira, Mozambique, across Africa, and back home to the United States. I remember one of our bass singers, Bo Moline, on the airplane, knelt down beside me as I was sitting there, and he said, Terry, I will never trust God again as long as I live. I looked at him and I was startled. He said, we have trusted him, we've sacrificed, we've done everything he asked us to do, and he's pulled the rug out from under us. This is not fair. Whoa. Friends, those kinds of things happen. Life is not always fair. We arrived back in New York City. It just happened to be the coldest winter in 99 years. Temperatures were down around 20 below zero. Outside of the airport in New York in the middle of a snowstorm, I looked at my wife, Jan, standing in a short-sleeved cotton dress. All of our clothes, winter clothes, heavy clothes, had been shipped to Africa in preparation for the tour, and now here we were stuck in New York City. Well, we didn't know what to do, and we had a battle, and I think I've told enough of the story to indicate that I want to tell the rest of the story next time we come together. And it will be continued, if I can say that. But I want to show you the incredible way that God taught us to handle hope and faith, to build hope and faith in our lives in order to grow and to continue and to complete the will of God. So we'll be back with that soon, and hope in God.